There is a kind of pride that builds a man up. You have seen it. The father who stands in the back of the school auditorium with his arms crossed and his eyes wet because his child just did something he never could. The grandfather who drives 4 hours in a car that needs a new transmission to watch a grandchild walk across a stage. The older man who has earned something real in this world, earned it with his hands and his back and his time, and who carries that weight not as a wall between himself and other people, but as a kind of quiet light. That is one kind of pride. And then there is another. There is a pride that doesn't build anything at all. It only measures, only compares, only survives as long as it can find something beneath it to stand on. This kind of pride is not really pride at all if you look at it closely enough. It's fear wearing a uniform. It's insecurity that spent 50 years learning the right handshake and the right vocabulary and the right room to walk into, so that nobody would ever ask it the question it has always been most afraid of answering: what are you without the rank? The man who walked onto my stage that Tuesday morning was carrying that second kind. He had carried it so long and had it confirmed so many times by so many people in so many rooms that I don't think he had any memory anymore of picking it up in the first place. It had become him. Or he had become it. I have been a black man in America for 67 years. I have stood in front of audiences and cameras and boardrooms and back-of-house hallways in this country for more than 2 decades. I have watched men like him walk through doors that were not built for people like me, and I have learned something about what that walk looks like from the inside. But this one was different. It was different because of the woman standing next to him, because of what was behind her eyes when she looked at me, because of what happened in 5 words on live television that I did not plan, did not rehearse, and have thought about almost every day since. That is what I want to give you today. 3 things. What I saw before the cameras rolled. What I said when the moment came, all 5 words, in the exact order, and why they landed the way they did. And what happened after. The part that is not in any clip. Stay with me. If you have ever stood in a room where someone tried to use a title to make you feel like you didn't belong, subscribe right now and turn on the bell. Because the answer I gave that man was not the one he expected. And it wasn't the one I expected either. It was a Tuesday. Early spring, Atlanta. My stage manager, a man named Curtis, 9 years with me. The kind of man who has seen every possible version of human behavior walk through a television studio and has never once lost his composure. Curtis came to find me 20 minutes before we were supposed to start taping. He didn't call. He came in person. He stood in the doorway of my dressing room and he said, "The colonel in Bay 1 asked the production coordinator whether you had any formal education." I asked Curtis to say that again. He said it again. And then, Curtis said, he asked her who was responsible for the talent decisions on this program. He said talent decisions the way Curtis says something when he is quoting someone who said it in a particular tone. Like the words had quotation marks built into them that you could hear. I told Curtis I appreciated the heads up. I told him to keep both eyes open. He nodded the way he always nods. Once, steady, finished, and went back to the floor. Lord forgive me. I let it go. His name was Colonel Raymond Ashford. Retired, U.S. Army, 34 years. He was 69 years old. 6 feet even. Silver haircut with military precision, not styled cut, the way a man gets a haircut when he considers a stray hair a form of personal failure. He was wearing a blazer the color of old money, deep charcoal, brass buttons, the American flag pin on the left lapel placed exactly 1 inch from the edge. a class ring on his right hand. The kind of ring a man wears not because he remembers the school, but because he never wants anyone to forget it. His handshake was firm. One pump. No eye contact. The handshake of a man who considers the gesture a formality rather than a greeting. He looked around my stage the way a general looks at a map. Assessing, measuring, not arrogant. Worse than arrogant. Constructed, she came out second. Her name was Paulette. 51 years old. Colonel Ashford's daughter-in-law, married to his son Daniel for 14 years. A registered nurse from Savannah. She was wearing a green wrap dress that she had pressed carefully, and her hair was done with the kind of careful elegance that told you she had spent time on it, not for the cameras. But because taking care of something carefully is the way certain women have been taught to show up for the world even when the world has not been showing up for them. Her face should have been open. She had a face built for openness, wide eyes, full cheeks, the kind of mouth that looks like it smiles easily when it gets the chance. But she carried her shoulders the way a woman carries them when she has learned that taking up space in a particular man's presence is something she has to justify. She glanced at the colonel when she walked out. Just once. Just for half a second. The kind of glance you give a room that has unpredictable weather. You check the sky before you commit to going outside. Something is wrong here. I felt it the way you feel the pressure change before a storm. Something quiet and long-standing and too familiar was happening between those two people. But we had a show to tape. A floor full of people and a countdown on the monitor and a game to play. Lord forgive me. I let it go. The first 2 rounds, Paulette was something to watch. Quick on the buzzer. Certain of her answers, she didn't second-guess herself. She pulled knowledge up the way people pull knowledge when they have spent years doing real work in the real world and have earned their confidence through service rather than title. The audience started leaning in the way they do when they feel like they're watching someone who was built for this moment. For those few precious minutes, I watched Paulette Ashford become somebody other than whoever she had to be in his presence. The shoulders unlocked, the jaw released. Her eyes came up from the floor where she had been carrying them, and she looked at the board and at the audience and at the lights, and I believe she was breathing in a way she had not been breathing all morning. The kind of breathing a person does when they forget, for just a little while, to brace. Colonel Ashford watched all of it. He did not cheer. He did not clap. He offered a measured nod when she got an answer right, the nod a superior gives a subordinate for acceptable performance. Not proud. Grading, he was not watching his daughter-in-law shine. He was watching himself be present while she did. That is a different thing entirely. The 3rd round is where the temperature changed. Paulette missed a question. A close one, the kind you get wrong not because you didn't know the answer, but because the phrasing catches you a half-second off. It happens to everyone. Colonel Ashford's response was a sound, not words. A short exhale through the nose, the sound a man makes when something confirms a suspicion he had been generous enough to keep to himself. It was quiet. Only people within 6 feet of him heard it. Paulette heard it. Her chin went down by exactly the distance it had come up over the last 2 rounds. I watched the woman who had been breathing so freely 30 seconds ago pull back inside herself, like something pulling back from cold water. The 4th round, she was answering with one eye on the board and one eye on him. Not the game. Him, the way you play when the stakes are not the game. My production associate Brianna, 3 years with the show, knew how to read a floor better than most people twice her age, looked at me across the stage. She did not say anything. She didn't have to. Before I tell you what he said, before I give you the words I will carry for the rest of my life, I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. Not for me. For Paulette. For every woman who has ever had everything she earned dismissed by a man who confused a title with a soul. Subscribe, then come right back, because what the Colonel said next I am going to give you in his exact words. And what I said back, all 5 of them, is the part that nobody who was in that room has forgotten. We were in the 5th round when it happened. The category was American History. Colonel Ashford had opinions about American history. He answered 2 questions with addendums, the kind a man adds to prove he knows more than the question asked. I received them with a smile I have had 40 years of practice delivering. Then I asked a question about civil rights legislation, about the long march of this country toward something closer to its own stated promises. Paulette knew the answer. I could see it in her face the instant I finished reading. She buzzed in. She answered. Correctly, completely, the board lit up. The audience responded, and Colonel Raymond Ashford, decorated veteran, 34 years of service, class ring on his right hand, flag pin exactly 1 inch from his lapel, leaned toward the microphone on his podium and said at full volume on live television, "You know, I'd expect a servant in a suit to know something about that era." Silence. Not the kind of silence that happens when a room is surprised. This was the other kind. The kind that happens when 200 people understand something at the exact same instant, and the understanding is so large that language cannot keep up with it. Dead silence. The kind where you can hear the overhead rigs ticking with heat, where you can hear the camera on the dolly make a quarter turn and stop, where 200 people remember, all at once, that they are sitting in chairs, that they have hands in their laps, that they are supposed to be watching a game show, that none of this is what they came here for. Paulette did not move. She stood at that podium, with her correct answer still hanging in the air above her, and she did not move, and she did not speak, and the look on her face was not shock. It was recognition. The terrible, exhausted recognition of a woman who has heard the temperature of that sentence before, maybe not those exact words, but that exact temperature, and who has spent 14 years learning how to survive the aftermath. Brianna had both hands over her mouth. Curtis took 1 step forward and then stopped himself. The Colonel stood with his hands flat on the podium. Satisfied. He looked satisfied. Not that he had done something wrong, but that he had finally said out loud what he had always privately considered to be accurate. 9 seconds. I have watched the tape. I know the count. In 9 seconds I had a lifetime of available responses. I know how to dismantle a person in front of a crowd in a way that leaves the audience clapping and the target with nowhere to stand. I have that ability. I am not going to pretend I don't. But I have also watched what happens to men who use that ability on men like Colonel Ashford. The clip runs. The internet applauds for 72 hours. And then the story becomes about the fight. And the fight swallows the thing that actually mattered, which was not the Colonel, but the woman standing 2 podiums to his left who had just had 14 years of her life summarized in 8 words on live television. That was the first wave. Then the second wave. My mother. She raised me and my brothers in Cleveland on a teacher's salary after my father passed, and never once let us see her buckle. She stood at a chalkboard for 29 years in schools that did not give her enough supplies, and taught children the system had already decided were not worth teaching. And she called it her calling, not her job. And the one thing she told me, when I was 12 years old and a man at the grocery store had said something to her that made her go quiet on the drive home, she said, "Baby, when a small man says a small thing, you don't make it bigger by getting down in it with him. You stand up straighter and you let him see the distance." I have carried that for 55 years. Then the third wave. I looked to the left side of the audience, third row. An older black man. 70-something. He had been clapping for Paulette all morning the way men of that generation clap, not enthusiastically, but steadily, which means something different and something more. When the colonel said what he said, this man did not gasp. He just looked at me with the level eyes of someone who has heard this particular sentence, in this particular temperature, every decade of his life, and has survived every version of it. His eyes said, "It's your stage. What are you going to do with it?" I made a decision. I set down the cue card. I did not hurry. I did not raise my shoulders. I walked, slowly, every step deliberate, until I was standing 5 feet from Colonel Raymond Ashford. Close enough that he had to look at me directly. Far enough that there was no confusion about who was in control of the space between us. I did not raise my voice. I did not point. I did not perform for the room. I did not look at the cameras. I looked at Colonel Ashford and I said 5 words in the voice my mother used when she was done explaining something and was now simply stating it. This suit built this stage. 5 words. I did not wait to watch them land. What a man does after he says something true is as important as the truth itself, and what I did was turn away from Colonel Ashford before he could say anything in response, because I was done with that direction, and I had somewhere better to be. I walked to Paulette. I got low. I bent my knees until I was at her level, the way you get low so that you are not a ceiling over someone who has been living under too many ceilings for too long. I took her hand in both of mine. I said, "You answered that question correctly. You have answered every question on this stage correctly. I need you to hear that from me. Not from the game. From me. You hear me, Paulette? You are exactly where you are supposed to be." She looked at me. For 3 seconds, 4 seconds, which is a very long time on live television, she just looked at me. And then her chin came up. Not for the cameras. Not for the audience. For herself. The kind of lifting that happens when a person remembers, in the presence of a witness, who they actually are. 200 people came to their feet, and the sound they made was not the sound of entertainment. It was the sound of recognition. The sound of an audience that has been holding something in their chests and has just been given permission to let it out. Colonel Ashford stood at his podium. His hands were flat on the surface. The class ring caught the studio light. He did not speak. That was a first for him, I suspect. If you are still with me, do me one favor before we go further. Share this video with one person right now. One person who needs to hear this story. One person who has ever had their credentials dismissed, their presence questioned, their worth measured by someone with a title and no understanding of what that title cost. One share. Then stay with me, because what happened in the corridor off that studio floor is the part that none of the cameras recorded. I stayed with Paulette for a while after production suspended. We sat in the chairs by the second camera bay, and I asked her if she was all right. She said she was fine. I told her I believed she was fine in the way that she had learned to be fine, and that I was asking something different. I was asking whether she was okay. There was a long pause. The kind a person takes when they have been waiting a long time to be asked the right question. She said, "He has never thought I was good enough for Daniel. From the very beginning. And the thing is, I stopped arguing about it. I just stopped. Because you can't win an argument with someone who isn't actually disagreeing with you. He just needs it to be true. So it keeps being true no matter what I do. I said, What you did on that stage today, those answers, that game, none of that came from him. None of that can be taken by him. You understand me?" She nodded. Then she said, "What did you mean?" "When you said what you said, I told her exactly what I meant. I meant that every room you have ever been told you didn't belong in was built by somebody who looked like you and me. I meant that the suit is not the point. The suit never was. What's inside it is the point. And what's inside you, Paulette, has been the point this whole time." She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "Nobody's said that to me in a long time." Before he left the building, I went to see Colonel Ashford. Not to apologize. I stated a fact on a television stage and walked away. I would give those 5 words again in exactly the same way. I went because I wanted to see what was left when the room was gone. He was sitting at a small table in the green room with the blazer still on and the flag pin still precisely placed. But the posture was different. Slightly, just enough. The way a building looks slightly different after an earthquake that did not knock it down, but found the places where the foundation was only pretending. I said, "I'm not here to continue anything. I'm here because I think you're smart enough to know what happened on that stage today, and I think you're old enough that you don't have unlimited time left to decide what to do with that knowledge." He looked at his hands. He said, very quietly, "My father used that word. Servant. He used it the way I used it today. I never thought about what it meant that I kept it. I did not fill the silence for him. Some silences are doing work, and interrupting them is a kindness nobody asked for." He said, "I don't know what to do with that." I said, "That's probably the most honest thing you've said today." I stood up. I said I hoped he found his way to something better than what he'd been carrying, and I walked out. Daniel Ashford issued a public statement within 48 hours. Paulette told people close to her that for the first time in 14 years, she had a conversation with Daniel about things she had been carrying alone. I don't know where that marriage went. That is private, and it is theirs. What I know is that Paulette Ashford drove home that evening in her own car, on her own terms. And the last thing Curtis told me before I left the building that night was that she had rolled the window down on the interstate. So let me bring you back to where we started. There is pride that builds. And there is pride that only survives by diminishing. You have met both kinds. In your family, at your job, at the table during the holidays, in the office where somebody's credential gets treated like a decoration while somebody else's gets treated like a qualification. You have felt the room go quiet the way that room went quiet. You have watched a chin go down. You have been the person whose chin went down. There are Paulettes everywhere. Brilliant, careful, bone-tired people who have learned to take up just a little less space in the presence of people who need them to be smaller. They are sitting next to you. They are behind you in the pharmacy line. They might be someone you have loved for 20 years, and you might have watched their shoulders drop in a particular room and told yourself it wasn't your business. It is your business. Don't be the room that went careful and stayed there. Don't be the one who almost said something. Trust the feeling in your chest that says this isn't right. That quiet, stubborn, inconvenient feeling that shows up before your brain can talk you out of it. It is almost never wrong. And if all you can give is 5 words, if all you have is one true sentence and the steadiness to say it without flinching, that is enough. It has always been enough. If this story stayed with you, do 3 things before you close this out. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. Because every week we bring you stories about ordinary people on extraordinary days who chose dignity over performance, and you deserve those stories in your life. Share this with one person. The one who is carrying something like what Paulette was carrying. The one whose chin has been down. The one who needs to hear that what's inside the suit is the point. Share it with them today. And drop a word in the comments for Paulette. Just one word, whatever is in your chest right now. Because she is not alone, and somebody scrolling through those comments at midnight tonight needs to know that good people are still out here paying attention. God bless Paulette. God bless every person who has ever been called something they aren't by someone who needed them to be less. You are not less. You never were. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you in the next one.